romantic. I Vanishya up like it's magic. Big gun, bigger than dinosaurs, that's in Jurassic. I drop her up like it's Titanic. Since I was young, always been a savage. Big gonna do lots of.
This is 25-year-old Shamaury White, better known as whyg. He's a popular Toronto rapper and a member of Driftwood's Wassgang. Under Blue Feather Records, he has songs alongside fellow artist Pressa, like Gamble and Neat Machine, and also a bunch of his own songs that have done numbers, such as Was, Backyardigans, Coolin, Her, Jason Bourne, and just recently dropped a project named Coronavirus. whyg is a talented artist, but is also known in the streets, as well as to police, with an interesting backstory. So today, on Savages from the Six, we'll be taking a look at whyg. So whyg was originally from Jamestown, an area in Rexdale that's no stranger to crime. He lived with his mom, who was usually busy from work and wasn't home, so he'd often spend his time at his grandma's, who lived in Maze by Jane and Shepherd. Eventually, he would move in with his aunt in Shoreham Court, Driftwood, and stay there for good. He says he bounced around a lot from locations in the West End while he was growing up. whyg's parents were longtime friends with the parents of Pressa, so naturally, they became friends when whyg would be around Driftwood. The two had a good friendship, and soon enough, whyg was part of Pressa's group, which at the time, the Young Buck Killers. But whyg wasn't just productive in doing music, but also in the streets. So now, let's take a look back at his history. In 2011, the police launched Project Marvel, investigating the Young Buck Killers, with a focus on Pressa's older brother, Mark Gardner, who was an alleged leader of the gang. There's a public document following parts of the investigation, and whyg's name, Shamaury White, comes up a bunch of times. It follows YBK and their alleged involvement in firearm and cocaine trafficking throughout the country. In October of 2011, police say whyg robbed a man who went by Brains of a gold chain, among other things. A day later, police were called to 390 Driftwood Avenue after reported domestic abuse. whyg was arrested, wearing the same gold chain he had just robbed. He ended up tricking the police by giving them a false name, Shane Campbell, who was someone he knew. He was released. Now in December 2011, whyg was at a house on Brady Crescent when police stormed in with a search warrant. In the house, police found a fully loaded Taurus handgun in a flower pot that had the serial number scratched off. Now I can't find any information if he was charged with the weapon or not, but he ended up going to jail on charges that were related to Project Marvel, with 60 others. Since whyg was a youth offender at the time, the court system was lenient on the charges, and he ended up being released. Now free, whyg would continue making music and keeping his head down. But after a few years went by, he soon found he was caught in a serious case himself. Now there's a decade-long feud that's been going around between two areas in Toronto, Rexdale and Driftwood. There's been multiple homicides and shootings related to this feud. Ironically, these are the two neighborhoods where whyg once lived, but his alliance to Driftwood was clear. This brings us to the next event in the timeline. This incident takes place in the morning hours of June 1st, 2016, in the parking lot of 15 Pittsboro Drive, the same housing complex in Rexdale that whyg once lived. Surveillance video shows two men, both armed, walk through the parking lot and approach a man on his bicycle. One of the men then takes out a gun from his handbag and fires at point blank range. The man is hit multiple times, and the suspects quickly flee the scene. The victim was identified as 20-year-old Nathan Lay. He was quickly rushed to the hospital, and despite several bullets piercing his lungs, he survived the incident, although he was tragically left paralyzed and in a wheelchair. The police believe it was a targeted shooting, and they began their investigation. At the time, they had no leads, but things changed 1 year later. It's not clear how, but eventually, the police were able to come up with two suspects. then 21-year-old Shamaury White, whyg, and the other man seen in the video, then 23-year-old Ibrahim Abdi Karim. A few short weeks after their picture went on the news, Ibrahim was caught by police and charged. whyg was wanted on a slew of charges, with the heftiest being an attempted murder, but he was nowhere to be found. He was now considered to be on the run, as well as armed and dangerous. With one suspect in custody, the police now shifted their focus and began to crack down on getting whyg. While they searched Toronto and all of Canada, whyg made his way across the border and into the United States. During an interview with We Love Hip Hop, whyg talks about how when he was on the run, he traveled all over the states, as far as Los Angeles. He was going to music shows and house parties, and talks about meeting up with other Toronto artists like Killy, Wonder Girl, and 88 Glam while he was in the city. But whyg wasn't just partying. He also proved to be productive music-wise while over the border, linking up with Jay Critch and making a track together called Lauren. whyg was living like he wasn't a wanted man in Canada. He would then go on to spend almost 2 years on the run, but the police would soon catch up to him. On April 26, of 2018, whyg was arrested in Columbus, Ohio. The local police were apparently investigating a firearm when they picked him up. Once they realized he had a warrant in Canada, he was extradited back to Toronto.
Welcome home.
Now that the police finally had whyg, he was facing some heavy charges. Pressa stepped in and paid $50,000 to a lawyer, Anthony Robbins, the same lawyer that helped clear him of his charges in his publicized kidnapping case. Now this lawyer is basically the Better Call Saul of Toronto, because even though whyg was allegedly caught on tape, plus went on the run for almost 2 years, he still managed to have his charges dropped in relation to the shooting. It took people by surprise, because whyg wasn't expected to be the case. And his accomplice in the crime, Ibrahim, well, I couldn't find any information about his charges and if they were dropped or not, but he was out of jail around the time of July 18, 2018, because he was arrested in downtown Toronto at Front and Spadina, along with 5 other people when police executed a search warrant. 2 guns were seized, so I'm assuming he's in jail at this point. As far as whyg, he was released and once again in the free world. He was cleared in the case, but there's still questions as to whether or not he was responsible for the shooting. Now it's obvious that whyg denies any involvement, hinting at his case in the track Gamble, saying,
They tried to frame me, it was a scandal.
But for now, we can just hope that he continues to focus on music and tries to stay out of trouble in the streets.